Urban Explorer, what was your "I better get out of here" story? Part 2. My friends and I were exploring an abandoned restaurant in this beach town one winter night. We snuck in through a broken window on the shore side, to avoid being spotted by any cars driving by. Overall, inside it was your typical abandoned restaurant, but was still really cool to check out. There was a long bar, tables tossed about. We walked downstairs into a wine cellar, and started walking through the labyrinth of hallways. The basement was deceptively larger than we would have expected for a beachside restaurant. Anyway, we wandered into this room off one of the hallways, and shined our flashlight in the corner, and we saw an unmade bed/cot, with all of the trappings of someone currently living there, a safety razor next to the mirror, random other belongings. Our stomachs immediately dropped as we realized we were currently in someone's living quarters, and promptly noped out of there. To this day we still don't know if the person was hiding in the basement with us, waiting for us to leave, or if we stumbled on it while they were out and about. Either way, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by someone from the shadows of that basement. So I was at an abandoned medical school in a pretty bad city with my friend. My friend told me homeless people squat there but only on the first floor. She even said one of her friends sat their backpack down and had it stolen by one of them in plain sight. So we avoided it and explored the second floor. We kept hearing random noises like someone was loosely following us, so we stayed on guard but never saw anything. We were then in this room and heard a louder noise and looked over to see a cat just chilling. It was the cat following us all along because after stopping to pet it and moving on, it continued following us, making the noises we kept hearing. It eventually came right up to us to be petted. We assumed it was a stray and wanted to get it help, so we agreed that if it followed us out, we'd take it somewhere or to someone who would care for it. It followed us outside then immediately ran from us when we were like, well, I guess we have a cat now. So I went to see where it went, only to see one of the doors to the abandoned building open and this 6-foot+ dude walk out and yell at me, "Y'all messing with my cat." I just about shit myself thinking I was about to get murdered or something. I was like, "Oh, is that your cat?" He followed us out. He's like, "Yeah, it's my cat. Colonel Mustard, get over here," and the cat came running to him. He introduced himself and we talked for a bit. He was actually a really cool guy, said he lives there and studies psychology and stuff to keep occupied. I was with several of my friends, and my girlfriend. We knew of this old abandoned nursery out in the country not too far from our college. It was on a weekend, and around midnight or so. I don't remember specifics. We pulled up, and we parked the car. I went in first, followed by my good friend, and my girlfriend. To be honest, nothing really occurred until the end, when we found this room at the end of this really short hallway. It had paintings of clowns, and 2 beds in it, that were meant for babies. My girlfriend claims to have heard a chuckle come from the room as we were leaving. We all turned because she spoke. My other friend screamed as the door slammed. Here's the thing. I turned right before she screamed, and I witnessed the door close, before she touched it. I know what I saw. She screamed, as the door slammed. Creepiest shit I had seen in person, in a very long time. So, there's a moderately well-known abandoned mental hospital close to my town. A few months back, a few friends and I went to explore a bit, not a rare thing for people here. We found this setup of a few folding chairs and a couple of old mattresses with blankets and whatever else you'd imagine on them. We chilled there for about 10 minutes and then went on with our adventure upwards. It was pretty uneventful from then on. A few really cool graffiti murals, an awesome view from the roof. When we were coming back down, we passed through the room and all the chairs were folded up and neatly stacked against the wall and the beds were made, or at least as close to that as it could have been. Whoever did it would have most likely known that we were there and waited for us to leave to do all of that, as it had only been about 45 minutes. No threats or anything, just an eerie feeling of being watched in an abandoned mental hospital. Exploring the grounds of a big old New England mental institution's campus at night. It's a full moon but pitch black inside, because the windows are so dirty. Being dumb kids before smartphones, we didn't come prepared with a lot of light and were mostly navigating by 2 flashlights between our group and the moonlight when outside. We're in the main building and most of it is what you'd expect, 60s, 70s decor, peeling paint, a couple weird looking chairs and 2 legit rubber rooms. A movie had been shot there at some point, so some of the walls are burnt from a stunt or something, I guess. There are 2 stairwells in the building on either end and we have to keep alternating between them because there's stuff in the way. We keep going through the floors until we reach the roof. The roof doors are these big heavy metal solid doors. The far stairwell door won't budge at all, so we go back down and try the other stairwell. This one we can see is kind of wedged open and the top corner of the door is bent back letting light in. We squeeze out onto the roof and walk around for a bit. I happened to be holding the flashlight and turned it back to the door. The door wasn't just bent, it was straight up peeled back to open it like a tuna can. There were 3 huge scars that I can only describe as claw marks, each one as long as an adult's forearm. I lost my shit and insisted it was time to go. We made an expeditious retreat out of the building, but it was still a good 2 to 3 minute walk back to our cars, which was definitely the most terrifying part of the night. No idea what could have made those marks. Just really glad we didn't decide to go into some of the other buildings that were totally sealed up. You had to enter through some underground tunnels, I think they were steam tunnels, that connected the buildings, and the entrance was super sketchy. Exploring an abandoned prison mental hospital/rehab facility. This was maybe my 4th or 5th time going, so I was starting to feel comfortable moving from floor to floor through the hospital, as it's in a very rural location on native land and isn't frequented often. It had been abandoned and largely untouched for over a decade. It was me, my younger brother, and a group of 4 of his friends, all had visited together previously. We moved confidently through the lobby and main floor of the hospital, but the air got thick and sticky on the second, and we all got an eerie feeling in our gut we hadn't felt before. We all described it as getting nauseous from the humid, gross-smelling air we hit. We moved through the rooms in 3 groups of 2 people, cautiously, as we all felt on edge and our adrenaline was pumping. We got to a room with a strip of showers, like a locker room shower. Unlike previous visits where this was just an empty shower, on this visit there were lifeless birds shoved headfirst down every shower drain, 10 to 12 separate showers in there, and black paint painted in a circle around every drain. Some of the birds were already skeletons. Some had to have only been there for a day or 2, they were still fresh and the ants had just started crawling on them. We bounced after examining it. I've been back once since then, about 4 months later, and the paint was still there but no new bird bodies. There's a place in Liverpool, UK called Mossley Manor. An old nursing home that's absolutely stunning. Inside it's being left to rot but there's lots left behind, pictures, files on residents. The place was shut down over cruelty to the residents. In fact, one of the files I read discussed how police were called over a resident, as paramedics arrived to them having passed, yet staff said they died in the ambulance. Anyway, I know this place inside and out. It's a beautiful building with a horrible history. It's fantastic for photos and digging into its past. I would go once a week and bring friends. Teach them how to respect the history. One day, I had a feeling. I'm not a huge paranormal believer but I had that feeling. Something was watching me. What? I don't know, but I felt it had always been there. Like it allowed me to feel confident before, so it could get me now. What would it do to me? Who knows? But I've never been back. I have a friend who is into his spooky memes. He was giving me some shite about negative energy manifesting into a poltergeist. He could be right. I would rather not know. Anyone interested in the building? It's easy to get into. Make sure you let someone know where you are. Make sure you wear the right clobber, steel toe boots and that, and be safe. There's an old flour mill on Harbor Island in Seattle. It's been abandoned and locked up for a while. My buddies went through a pretty serious Urban X phase near the end of high school, so we were going to all sorts of weird and interesting places in the area just checking it out. Got chased out by cops a few times, usual stuff. Anyway, inside this flour mill we're working our way through some of the regular block areas, and our buddy swears he heard something. We all stopped dead in our tracks, lights pointed down, just listening. The amount of noise a dilapidated building makes when you're trying to be quiet is amazing. Constant creaking and wind noises. Then I started to hear it. It was shuffling, with the sound of somebody dragging something across concrete. At this point I can feel my heart jumping out of my chest, the blood pulsing in my ears and head. I'm hyper-aware as I try and pinpoint this sound and associate it with something I knew. By the time we're sure it's not just the wind, we've all heard the noises. There were 5 of us in there, and we're starting to think it's coming from near the stairs. We slowly, achingly, creep our way over broken glass and dirt. When we came up on the stairwell, we shined our lights down and up to the adjacent landings for the floor we were on and couldn't see anything. My buddy turns around, steps on an old water bottle on the ground, making the loudest crackling a water bottle has ever made in the history of recyclables. One of my other friends, looking back down the factory area we came through, gets startled and yells, "Fuck," at the sound of the water bottle. We immediately heard the most chilling, deep, scream. At that instant we all just put the gas on and ran out of there. At the bottom of the stairwells we ran into around 10 homeless people who weren't there before, but we paid them no mind and didn't stop our dead sprint until we got back to our cars. We figured it must have been some homeless person we scared with our creeping around and then sudden expletive, but we never saw the person or identified the sound. So who knows? Last week one of my good friends made the pilgrimage across a few states on his motorcycle, to go visit extended family. Decided to camp along the way, in an effort to get out into nature, and catch some scenic sunsets. He texted me an SOS after he made it to his family's house, and told me this over FaceTime. In parts of West Texas, there are only gas stations every 90 miles or so. Getting low on gas before the last sunset, he decided to camp near 2 abandoned structures. The next morning, with DSLR in hand, he decides to go exploring. As he's filming, he walks into the second structure and panics. A person is sitting in a chair with her head rested on the table, an arm dangling to the side, and a trash bag over her head. He runs to the road and tries to get a hold of Border Patrol, as he was 40 miles from the border, he later found out. After walking some miles, he got the attention of a Border Patrol agent. After all is said and done, the Border Patrol agents inform him that her death had been reported by the man who helped her group get across the United States border. They also tell him that 13 inches of snow a couple nights prior was believed to be the cause of death. After being detained for a few hours, he was let go in part because the evidence on his camera put him in a different state when it happened. He said the worst part about it was he felt in some ways she was relatable. Even worse, she was his age, 20 years old, and made it all the way from Guatemala, only to pass away 40 miles after crossing the US border. Heartbreaking. He promised me he won't camp next time, and will get a motel or Airbnb. When I was in high school, my girlfriend lived in Topanga Canyon, which is a pretty bizarre place filled with bizarre people. Well, one night I was leaving her house and I had to walk down the road to get to my car, road in quotes because most of Topanga's houses are accessed by barely single-lane cracked tar roads with stumps and stuff coming up through them. It was like a 10-minute walk down the hill, and I got to my car and got in. It was pitch black. I sat there for a moment and before I turned my car on, I heard a noise. Thinking it was an animal, I didn't move. How am I supposed to know if a bear or a mountain lion can break into a 1990 Volvo 240DL? I heard the noise past the car, but I didn't see anything. Literally nothing. I froze. After about 5 minutes, I decided that if it was something dangerous it would have stopped, so I turned on the car. I switched on my headlights and drove the rest of the way down the hill. That's when I saw them. As I turned onto a wider road, I saw 2 people with black cloths draped over their entire bodies, no shoes, walking slowly down the road in the direction I was driving. The cloths must have been velvet or similar, because they were pitch black even as my headlights passed across them. I gunned it around them and turned onto the main road, and watched in my rearview mirror as my taillights' red color faded on their forms. I then realized that if I had left my girlfriend's house about 30 seconds later I would have literally walked into 2 people, wearing jet black, walking slowly in total darkness in the middle of the night in Topanga. Just got a shiver thinking about that. This was back in summer 2012. Every morning my mum used to take me and my brother to our grandparents while she went to work. My grandparents lived in a really isolated rural area. Near my grandparents' house, there was a huge abandoned factory, and I've always wanted to go see what was in there. So I begged my uncle, he lived at my grandparents' house, to explore that building. He said yes, so we went to the building and searched for an opening to get inside. Once inside, we started to look around the place and obviously found nothing except old machines and stuff like that. When we were about to leave, we heard noises coming from upstairs, and then steps. We saw a shadow coming towards us, so we got the heck out of there running. A few days later, I was at my grandparents' house with all my cousins. Suddenly, the neighbors rang our doorbell and told us that there was someone breaking into our back garden. My uncle went out to check while one of my cousins called 112, the local police number. Soon after the call, my uncle came back inside, and he told us that he saw the guy who had broken in, running towards the old abandoned building. I never discovered if the guy in the building and the one in the garden were the same person. Pretty messed up story. I was exploring an abandoned theater, since demolished, at a state school. I rarely have experiences and mostly do urban exploration by myself, but this particular time there were loud screeches, metal sounds, and bangs that I can't attest the building ever made before or after the many times I've explored it. I knew, without a doubt, that someone was there and wanted to make themselves known. Very strange. It was the only experience I've ever had in that particular building, although others have said they experienced other things. Same complex, except the actual hospital/asylum with the padded walls and such. It was the only building I ever hated going into, and I only did so twice, mostly with other people. The moment you walked in, you felt you weren't alone, the air felt very strange, and I always walked out with a terrible headache that went away as soon as I left the building and went into a different one. Ironically, it was the newest building on the campus. It's since been torn down and I don't miss it a bit. A psychic friend refused to walk near it since he got a strange vibe from it also, completely separate and without knowing my own experience with the building. On the flip side, I gave a bunch of amateur urban explorers a scare too. My boyfriend and I were in a mostly empty newer building on the same complex, and we heard a bunch of teenagers being stupid, yelling, etc. You know how young ones are. Anyway, we were in the coat/locker room of the building and I was talking to him. You couldn't see him though, and I was backlit because the window was behind me. They came loudly through the door and I just sort of silently looked at them, didn't blink, didn't move, and didn't say anything. They kind of had this freaked out look on their faces, then backed up and left the building. I still giggle at that one. I explored a mental health facility that closed down in 1986. I know this because all of the patient files were still there, and the visitor logs ended one day in 1986. They were covered in soot from multiple fires, dust, and other grime, but you could sit there among the cracked pipes, broken glass, and heroin needles and read about patients, their daily lives, how often relatives came to visit them, details of their medication, etc. It was weird having such insight into the lives of mentally ill individuals, or just social rejects committed there by uncaring families, as often happened back in the day, without having any idea what happened to them after that day in 1986. Homeless, returned to their families, maybe even some of the very junkies who still frequented the place. Or they just went on to live perfectly normal lives having no idea their history of mental illness was on display in an abandoned building behind a Long John Silver's. I grew up in Boulder, the town next to us was Longmont. There's this sugar mill building there, it's huge and old and super abandoned. One night a friend and I were hanging out with some girls we knew, we were all high school age so I guess this was the best thing we could come up with, and we all decided to drive over to Longmont and explore this abandoned sugar mill. We were driving down Hover Road and a hatchback pulled up next to us. Also kids. They looked at us, we looked at them. Animosity ensued and the next thing I know we were driving down the road and these guys were waving a samurai sword out their window. Okay, weird. Anyway, we drove up to the sugar mill, a super desolate, quiet area, and this hatchback showed up on the same road. The same hatchback as before. It was just us and them out on this country road. The girls were freaking out, I didn't know what to do. We got back in my car and tried to drive away, they were blocking us, being super confrontational. I can't remember what was said but basically we yelled at each other a bit from inside our respective shitbox cars and then they drove off. We did end up exploring the sugar mill that night and didn't think too much of the encounter. Next morning in the paper there was a story about some kid who had his life taken by a bunch of other kids with a sword. Those Longmont meth heads. In my early 20s, my friends and I used to explore an abandoned town called Padova City, or Tranquille, near Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. The entire town up and left one night, very suspiciously, in the 1950s, leaving all their belongings behind. There is an entire network of underground tunnels beneath the town that connects all the buildings, asylum, school, laundry house, residence houses, dining hall, and so on. Apparently, unethical experiments were performed on people there. Some people think this town was a secret military base because it sat between a river and some train tracks. The town was its own isolated covert operation. The place is now considered very haunted and is known for all sorts of creepy paranormal activity. I could tell you many stories about the times we explored it. We had to be careful, though, because the groundskeeper would try to catch trespassers and shoot at us with a hacky sack gun. One time, 3 friends and I went into the abandoned asylum and started walking down the main hall on the first floor. There were scratch marks on the walls that had peeled the wallpaper down in a creepy way, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. In one room we found old rag dolls, kids' balls, and a few aged wooden blocks. We felt as if we were being watched, and all my hair stood on end. We kept walking past one creepy room after another. I was up front, with all my friends in a line behind me. All of a sudden we heard a really loud hissing sound, almost like a huge blast of air being released from a hose. It came from the room just ahead of me on the right. We were about to walk past the open door. It scared the shit out of us, so I reeled backward into my friend. We all turned on our heels and ran out as fast as we could. It honestly sounded demonic at the time, but it is possible a wild cat, like a mountain lion or something, had been in one of the rooms and hissed. Either way, something was warning us to get out, and we were too scared to wait and see what it was. I have other experiences there, but they are more paranormal in nature. This story is the one that left me questioning what that hiss was. We were definitely not alone in there. After exploring the place a handful of times, I decided never to go back. It haunted me for years. It has been about 6 years since I was there, and I plan on never going back. That place feels infected with evil, and I do not want to get mixed up with it again. Not urban but rural. Back in 2013 when I was 14, my boyfriend at the time and I decided to walk the woods near my parents' place. Now mind you, I had been walking these woods with various friends for an entire year at this point. The opening of a clearly made trail came from the street, and after the first mile you came to a big circular clearing. We'd seen old campfires there before and even walked all of it to the point it led us to another neighborhood. This time was different. A few walks prior, another friend and I had spotted a tent. We never dared go close to it because it wasn't there the previous year. Now, my boyfriend and I were walking and we realized this tent was in shambles, completely torn up, but still standing. This already gave me the creeps and the entire time it felt like someone else was there with us. Of course, as a 15-year-old boy, my boyfriend had to be brave. So we continued to walk down the path and I had no good feeling about this walk. He decided to get off the path a little bit and go towards some running water we heard. It was downhill a bit, completely covered in leaves where I lost my footing. I fell and as I went to get up, I shit you not, human skeletal remains were right beside me. I absolutely freaked out and called my boyfriend over and he instantly got pale. Now mind you, both of us completely freaked out, took a quick set of photos, for the police later, and ran the entire 3 miles at this point back to the main road, down that road, and all the way to my parents' house. We knew we'd probably be in trouble but I was freaking out and trying to tell my parents what happened in a shaken-up voice. They seriously didn't believe us, even after the photos, but we begged them to call the police. Police came, we had to walk them all 3 miles back to the skeleton and give them all our photos. Turns out it was a man from a neighboring town about 30 minutes away, reported missing since 2011 by his sister. Poor 14-year-old me had nightmares for a good month and I've never returned. Nothing else was made of it. Every year, my extended family gets together, rents a cabin by a lake for a week, and has a good time. This one year, we couldn't get our regular spot, so we rented a different cabin and lake. On this lake was an island that had one old house on it. You could see it was abandoned, empty windows, broken siding, weather damage, the whole shebang. It also had this very cool, and very creepy area that curved into a cove, with a dilapidated bridge that used to bar it from the rest of the water. Anyway, my auntie, who was in college at that time, took middle school me out in a boat, and we went to land in this cove and explore. There was a newer fence put around the island, but I was tiny enough that I could scoot under where a hole was. We weren't near the house at all, we just wanted to see this area that had a freaky garden. I was having a great time, admiring all the overgrown stuff and reading this weathered sign that said something about a Garden of Eden, when my aunt, who was still in the boat, and I heard footsteps. Turning, down a long pathway towards the abandoned house, I see a security guy, like full-blown attire with the police belt and stocky build. He sees me, tenses, says something into the walkie-talkie on his shoulder, and sprints at me. And me, being a middle schooler whose worst crime was jaywalking, crawled back under the fence so fast I scraped my back. My auntie ushered me into the boat, and we paddled away without looking back. We heard the guy stop at the spot, curse, and after hearing a loud thump, I turned and saw he had thrown a huge log over the hole. I've never been back since, but dang if I still wish I knew what that was all about. Some friends and I broke into an abandoned mental institution. In one of the rooms, we found a fist-sized white and red box with medical markings on it. It was sitting on the floor on top of a half-broken record. One side of the box was busted open and inside there was what appeared to be some sort of organ. There was a dark red fluid all around the box that was just starting to congeal around the edges, so it was clearly fairly fresh. On a side note, we also found a room with patient records and whatnot in it. Needless to say, as crazy kids, we took some. Afterwards, we went to a diner and started going over the paperwork to see what we found. Among the stuff, we found a single page from a photo album with 6 photos on it. 3 of the 6 photos were of my friend's mom, who had worked there several decades prior. My friend was with us that night. She had no idea her mom worked there. They were the only photos we found. I've only been brave enough to do urban exploration once. Well, twice I guess, but the same location both times. Near an apartment I used to live in, there was an old hotel that was abandoned and boarded up. One night, a friend was over and hanging out with me. We had a few drinks and, in a moment of inebriated bravado, a little tipsy, but not fall down drunk at all, we decided that exploring the old hotel would be a brilliant idea. We made our way over and explored a couple of the rooms. The doors were on the outside, so it may have been a motel rather than a hotel. I'm not sure of the difference. The rooms were moldy, dirty, and broken down, but didn't have anything unexpected. There was some graffiti on the walls and some condoms on the ground. Then, we went into the office/lobby area. As soon as we walked in, we froze. There, in the distance, in the darkened lobby, was a man staring at us. He didn't move, just stood there and stared us down. We bolted, quickly, and ran at a full sprint back to my apartment. Thankfully, the man, homeless, drug addict, we didn't know, didn't follow us. A few days later, my friend was back over during the day. We were talking about the experience with the hotel and, this time spurred on by daylight, decided to look in the hotel lobby again. When we entered, the man was still there, standing in the same spot, staring us down, and made of cardboard. We had gotten freaked out by a cardboard cutout hawking the hotel's website and online bookings. I live in a big US West Coast city. In a neighborhood where most homes go right up to the sidewalk property line and have a yard and back, my place is the opposite. The house is at the back of the lot, and the front yard keeps me buffered from street noise. It's a nice, dark little oasis in the city. My house has a double door/split door, so the top can open independently of the bottom. I often leave the top open when the weather's nice. I'm sitting on the couch in the living room, all of 15 feet from the door. It's nighttime, I'm reading, and the door's more or less directly in front of me. The porch light's off, the yard's dark, and the only light's from the dimmed reading lamp I'm using. The wind keeps blowing the top part of the door open, closed, open, closed. I'm used to it, it happens all the time, and doesn't sound out of place. Until the door kind of misses a beat. I don't hear it thud closed. I look up, and it's perfectly still, only open 2 or 3 inches. It's one of those, what the hell are my eyes seeing, moments. There's like a 15-mile-per-hour wind outside. How is the top part of the door partially open and perfectly still? Then my eyes or brain recognizes it. The outline of a hoodie, drawstrings, hood up. In that instant, I'm frozen and my heart is pounding. Someone is literally standing right there, hood up, holding my door open. I can't see his face, but he sees me noticing because he says, "You should keep your doors locked." What the hell? Now my adrenaline kicks in, I jump up shouting, and he bolts. I get the porch light on in time to see him running out the gate. I still wonder how long he'd been standing there or what the hell he was doing/thinking. The door has been kept very well locked since then.